if you're still watching with us live on Zoom or on Facebook, congratulations. We have now made it to just past the halfway mark of our program for World Industrial Design Day. And we will be switching continents again at this moment, where I am very excited to welcome Suné to the stage, the virtual stage with me. Suné is joining us from Cape Town, South Africa, where she is the co-founder, custodian, and CEO of Open Design Africa. I will add her here. A social enterprise and not-for-profit company and WDO member. She's a designer, impact entrepreneur, design activist, and educator who strongly believes in the power of creativity as a change agent and catalyst to drive and scale systematic change and to develop a future-making culture who can confidently add value to the greater good, drive the UN SDGs agenda, and contribute to the design of regenerative economies, thriving communities, and flourishing environments. Open Design Africa was designed as a key platform and vehicle to demonstrate, advocate, and drive these important agendas. You can, of course, read more about Suné and this esteemed panel in our program, which we've added to our chat. And I'm very happy to welcome her to our virtual stage and allow her to open this panel and introduce us to the wonderful group that she's brought together today.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for this great invitation, and to WDO for hosting this global celebration of diversity. And I must say, it was with great excitement that we started preparing for today, and also done in collaboration with WDO's Young Designers Circle, who will, after our conversation, host a very exciting workshop. And a special welcome also to everyone for joining us in this session. We also hope that you will be able to stick around and join us for the YDC's workshop, but more about that later. To set the scene for the session, I want to invite you to sit back and enjoy the magic of creativity set against a dramatic backdrop of African beauty, and our message to the world of small is massive and the power of togetherness. One sec.
Warm greetings from beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. I am Suné Stassen, a designer, educator, impact entrepreneur, and the founder and CEO of Open Design Africa. I always look at our man-made world through a design lens, with the human race at the helm as the chief designer. For generations, we have successfully engineered a destructive and unjust world for living in. At Open Design Africa, we believe that collaborative, creative intelligence is a superpower. We also believe that every child and citizen should have the right to develop it. This will enable and empower everyone to confidently contribute to the future making of a world we can all feel proud to live, work, and play in.
Open Design Africa calls on
all Africans
and people from around the world
to action small seeds of change.
Everywhere!
Because collectively, the impact will be massive.
Today, we have the most important design brief to write in the history of mankind to secure a thriving future for humanity and the planet. Our African humanist philosophy of Ubuntu beautifully defines that I am, you are, because of who we all are. Let's design our futures together.
I want to take our lead from Mother Nature, who continues to design a thriving ecosystem to last for 10,000 generations and more. And I touch base with a friend at Learn by Mimicry, Jess Berliner, who unfortunately couldn't make it to join us today. And while I quote Jess, I invite you to close your eyes, forget about everything around you, be in this moment, and jump on board on an imaginary journey of our body. Now, with your eyes closed, imagine you are holding your hand in front of your face. Look at it carefully. Peer into the inside of your hand. Notice the blood vessels, the pits, pores, and skin cells. Notice the tendons, bones, cartilage, and muscles, the bacteria, enzymes, sugars, and molecules. This is an exquisite example of diversity, working in highly effective, collaborative, and cooperative relationships. Everything from the largest tree to a singular human relies on the success of diversity and meaningful connections, where information, energy, and resources flow freely between all its parts, so that this diverse system can be aware, reactive, and resilient. I invite you to put aside the narrative that sets us apart from the living world and reconnect with the genius of diverse life forms that surrounds you every day. As we say in Africa, Ubuntu, I am because you are. This was a very quick activity to heighten our awareness of the importance of symbiotic relations and authentic connections that's crucial to sustain life in all its forms before we start today's conversation. Humanity's inability to holistically and systemically approach the design of our man-made world has captured and disabled nature, our environments, and global populations from prospering and confidently contributing as future makers. The triple bottom line, people, planet, and the economy, forms the very foundation of this process, this design process. At best, humanity's legacy as the chief designer has been a world that is in constant survival mode, disregarding people and planet with a devastating ripple effect felt by generations as the result. Now, let's give a warm welcome, a virtual welcome, to the two very dynamic women who are joining us from South Africa and Nigeria, respectively. Njeri is a senior futurist at the Institute for Futures Research at the University of Stellenbosch, and her work focuses strongly on strengthening capabilities of individuals, organizations, and countries in Africa to help navigate complexities and uncertainty so that they can realize their long-term and sustainable goals and vision. She has a real passion for contributing to development of appropriate leadership, organizational performance, relevant knowledge, gender equality, diversity, inclusivity, and transformation. Benedicta is the founder of Goals for Development Goals Foundation. This is a platform that she uses to utilize the SDG templates to enlighten goals on sexual and reproductive health. Although she has a background in pharmacy, Benedicta's made an early decision to dedicate all her efforts to community development with a special focus on the girl child. And by the way, this young lady earned a standing ovation when she represented Africa at the One Youth Summit in Brussels. It is truly awesome to be seated next to you around our virtual table, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Suné. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Today, I'm going to, like we mentioned in the video before, we are faced with the most important design brief in the history of humankind. And Njeri, from a futures thinking and policy perspective, what do you believe should be the core components of this crucial design brief that will enable us to design and develop strategies that can positively impact our future for 10,000 generations and more?
Thank you, Suné. Yes, indeed, we have a very significant design brief to address if we are to take seriously the fundamental and critical issues that are facing us. And allow me just to mention a few pertinent issues to situate our conversation today. So of course, we have the climate crisis, which is demanding substantive systems and structural transformation. whether we head into environmental chaos and need to deal with a number of natural disasters that could displace populations from villages, cities, towns, islands, even countries, or even whether we move towards a green shift and avoid natural disasters. Nevertheless, substantive changes will be required to our personal, professional, and leisure lives, including our modes of mobility, systems of transport, modes of production, systems of industry and manufacturing, the commodities we use and value, including how we source them. And then, of course, another very important issue is the increasing divide between the ultra wealthy and the abjectly poor. And this is, there's heightened awareness of this given our hyperconnectivity through the internet and social media, where we see excessive consumer lifestyles, which generate excessive wealth as well, waste as well. Displayed alongside reports of humanitarian crises from hunger to refugees. And this disjuncture is jarring, and in my view, jarring in an untenable way. So this is happening in the midst of an information age when we have access to countless opportunities for innovation and solution finding. And at the same time, these same opportunities are also avenues for misinformation and political and corporate manipulation of consumer and voter choices, as well as opening avenues for hate and anger, and even in some cases, rage. All right, so having set that context, what kind of very significant and important design brief from a futures thinking lens and policy perspective could we discuss in terms of core components to pull us away from futures and destructive future paths towards more smoother roads that will allow us to realize our highest potential in terms of the totality of our existence, so the diversity we represent, as well as the environments we cohabit, and the increasingly with space travel, the galaxies and the universe of which we are a small but important part. So, Suné, I would like to suggest two core components for us to consider. And this is part of a basket of essential elements that are also important. But given our conversation today on diversity, I would like to emphasize inclusivity and sustainability. And in the language of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 30, I'm emphasizing the people and planet aspect. In my view, these are in any case necessary components for the prosperity and economy aspects as well. So in terms of inclusivity from a futures thinking lens, it's really important to include diverse perspectives and interest groups in how we anticipate and imagine different possible futures, as well as consider what possible outcomes may emerge and demand responses from us in terms of maybe planning and preparedness, but also in terms of change and adaptation. And I would like to paraphrase a beautiful quote from a faith leader and spiritual teacher, Abdu'l-Baha, who discusses diversity, asking us to consider the flowers of a garden, which are different in kind, color, form, and shape. And yet all are refreshed by the same water, revived by the same wind, invigorated by the same sun. And Abdu'l-Baha asks us to consider the ways in which the diversity of hues, of forms, and of shape enriches and adorns the garden and adds charm and beauty. And he asks us to liken this to diversity of thought, of temperament and character, and how when these are brought together, these are brought together under a central agency, you have the full realization of our highest potential, and this is made manifest. So diversity is extremely important to address the critical design brief we're speaking about today, particularly from a futures perspective, because there is not only one possible future, but many possible futures available to us. And there is not only one possible path to our preferred futures or our desired futures, but many possible paths available. and therefore it's important to consider diverse worldviews, viewpoints, and perspectives in imagining what could be possible and what our responses to that may be. And from a policy perspective, this means opening the policy space to different trans and multidisciplinary perspectives, but also to different voices. And here I want to highlight the voices of women, of youth, people with disabilities, local and indigenous communities, as well as other marginalized voices that otherwise don't have a space at our policy making and our design tables. So I think it is increasingly important for us to value the contributions that come from these diverse spaces and to integrate them into our evidence-driven and data-based policy approaches to have applicable and responsive policy. Then on sustainability, quickly, Suné, I want to perhaps emphasize, as you mentioned, taking our cue from nature, the importance of establishing a balance between equilibrium and disequilibrium. And of course, equilibrium is important because that keeps the system at stasis. It maintains balance and stability. But at the same time, this equilibrium is valuable because this is where learning occurs. And this is where we have change and transformation within the system in response to internal or external pressures. And we allow for adjustment and adaptation back to equilibrium. And I want to emphasize this as it's important that we understand this equilibrium from a nature viewpoint is not a perpetual state. Perpetual disequilibrium leads to the destruction of the system. So disequilibrium tends to equilibrium. And I think there's something policymakers could learn from this dance, especially making learning integral to our policy processes so that when we face situations of change, transformation, and disequilibrium, our response is not to try to maintain the system as it currently is within its current functionality, but rather to be responsive and adapt, pulling on the resilience of those aspects of the system continuity, but also pulling on those aspects, the diverse aspects that allow us to respond to change. And I think that the outcome with this kind of a dance is sustainability and longevity and indeed prosperity. So Suné, those are the two core components I would like to emphasize from a people and planet perspective. Inclusivity in terms of unity in diversity and opening the policy space to different voices and perspectives, and sustainability in terms of a good balance between equilibrium and disequilibrium, allowing for change and allowing for that adaptability for the system to be more responsive to the pressures it's experiencing.
Thank you, Njeri. That was extremely insightful and valuable, which also brings me to the core foundation of it all. You know, for generations, education did not prioritize creativity to help develop human qualities and future-making life skills, like empathy and emotional intelligence in all children. So it should not be a surprise that we are living in a very destructive and unjust world where many have to constantly navigate the impact of poor judgment, because decision makers forget that every citizen of this world, no matter their age, abilities, beliefs, or even their nationalities, is an invaluable resource and asset that can contribute greatly to the greater ecosystem of global efforts to help ignite change and transformation. Benedicta, I'm going to come to you. Your personal story is such a great testimony to this. How did your childhood in Nigeria informed and shaped and inspired your personal and professional journey?
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to be finally here. I grew up in a small community in Delta State, Nigeria. And well, you can say that I come from an average family. So my parents were able to afford to send me to a neighboring boarding school. And it was actually a very beautiful experience because he helped shape me into the woman that I am today. But what I noticed was that during my holidays coming back home, I realized that a chunk of my classmates in primary school or schoolmates were pregnant. And it just got me thinking, like, what is the problem? How it was embarrassing and heartbreaking at the same time. Imagine accompanying my mom to the market or to the salon, and then my classmates are just everywhere. And this means actually that they have to drop out of school. And not very many of them have the, will I say, the guts, especially because of the stigma that's associated with teenage pregnancy. Not very many of them have the guts to go back to school after the whole ordeal. So I began to think, trying to connect the dot with what's the problem, what is going on. And then I realized that what I was enjoying in boarding school could actually be what was lacking. What was that? Counseling. Now, being in boarding school meant that we were entitled to, there were counselors everywhere. Every morning on the assembly, even over the weekend, so those things helped me stay sane. So on the other hand, I decided to give back to my community girls what they could not have. And how did I do that? I decided to create a safe space where they could be themselves without judgment. We know this thing with African parents and the hush culture around sex. Don't tell them what sex is. I mean, coming back from school and then asking your mom, someone's mentioned this in school. What does this mean? Shut up, face your books. You're like, don't ask me. You're too young to know that. But what we don't realize is that teenagers, they're very curious. They will always find answers. And the problem is, once you don't give them the right answer, whatever their peers throw at them is what they accept. So we decided to create a non-judgmental space. How did I do that? Out of passion, I walked up to the pastor of my church, coming from a Christian background, and I told him everything I wanted to do. And surprisingly, he let me use the church auditorium, to host students. And then my mom also is a school principal in one of the biggest schools in the community, a vice principal. So I spoke with her, and through her, I was able to reach the school principal. And I literally wrote to almost every single principal in that community. And surprisingly, they were willing to release their students to me even on a Saturday on their school uniform. Now, that first ever project, which we tagged Campaign Against Teenage Pregnancy, had over 300 students in attendance. So we put them together at my church. I got experienced speakers, religious leaders who of course represented, and even community leaders, their teachers as well. It was a very beautiful experience. Now we got to teach them, what sex education was, and they had the opportunity to ask these questions they've been yearning to ask. So it was a really safe space. And the good thing was we were able to nip some abuses that were about to happen in the board. So I had this girl walk up to me and say, "Ma, actually, somebody near my house has been trying to force me into having sex with him, and I don't know how to tell my mom." So we're able to, guide them and to navigate how they can avoid such from happening. I didn't realize that what I was doing out of passion was actually, even though it was small at the grassroots level, like I was solving a global problem, until I applied randomly for one of these opportunities, and then one campaign selected me. Now, that was like the game changer for me. They trained me, gave me the exposure, gave me the platform. Like Sonia rightly said in while she was reading just a bio of me, they sponsored me on a trip to Europe to give a breakdown of the activities of their organization in Nigeria, on what they are doing on advocating for the girl child, ensuring that the out-of-school girls, the population of out-of-school girls is brought to the lowest, to the barest minimum. And today, my organization has grown from just advocating against teenage pregnancy to advocating for menstrual hygiene. And like I said, these were things that I experienced firsthand in the boarding school. What has that, we've moved from just donating sanitary pads to girls to keep them in school to partnering with one of the biggest menstrual cup company in the world, Organic Cup in Denmark. A couple of months ago, we partnered with them to distribute free menstrual cups, over 200, to across 6 states in Nigeria. So yes, my childhood has really shaped me into the woman that I am today, and is greatly, you can attribute it greatly to the little efforts that I am making to ensure that my society, my community, Africa is a better place.
What a beautiful story, Benedicta, and one that clearly expressed the power and impact of some of these future-making skills like empathy and emotional intelligence. So thank you very much for sharing. Before we move towards the end of this conversation, Njeri, can you give us a quick holistic overview? Now that we have a focus on Africa, how can we add a future lens to the African story?
Thanks, Suné, and thanks, Benedicta, for sharing your story. I would like to actually pull on some of the elements that Benedicta mentioned in responding to how we could add a future lens to the African story. And it links to my previous comments on the importance of inclusivity and ensuring that we allow for safe spaces for these alternative voices and experiences to be shared, as well as the best practice, the knowledge, and the policy applicability to be disseminated to wider levels of the system as well. And as Benedicta shared, having those interconnections across systems so that we can ensure that initiatives at grassroots levels that are making an impact can contribute to higher levels of policy that are shaping the futures that we are aiming to shape and create. So I would say a core component of adding a futures lens to how we're engaging the African story is ensuring visibility of these stories, experiences, and narratives, and pushing towards envisioning multiple possibilities for the potential that we have. Thanks, Suné.
Well, thank you very much, both for you to take the time and share your passion and your value and insights and experiences. I know that I will definitely leave the session feeling enriched and with a lot of food for thought. I want to conclude by inviting everyone that's been joining us to start imagining the immense added value and ripple effect on our future economies, our environments and communities if empathy and emotional intelligence, for instance, guided all our decisions in government, as leaders, and even in our personal lives. This is a great possibility and certainly one worth aspiring to, but this aspiration can only be realized if we start to prioritize the development of creative intelligence across all levels of education. It's these human qualities that are our differentiators and our only competitive advantage over the machine. Even if we start to plant small seeds of change everywhere, it's our collective impact that will make the massive difference. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Can we have a look at any questions that we have from the audience? Sarah or Natalie?
Hi, Suné. Yes, we just received a comment. Great session from one of our listeners. We have quite a number of people who are watching us on Facebook as well, which is great. No particular questions at this time, though.
Njeri, Benedicta, do you have any final comments?
Go ahead, Benedicta.
All right, thank you. I'd just like to say thank you once again for having me. And like Njeri says, that we hope that this information and conversation gets to decision makers, because the importance of including, grassroots changes and solutions into policies cannot be overemphasized. I mean, we should all be concerned about how people who really need these changes or these solutions, we should be concerned about whether or not it gets to them. So it's not just enough to sit in big offices and positions and throw policies around. The impact is actually really important. So these solutions should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, it's that huge power of the ripple effect. If we can start designing going forward with strategies and taking into consideration that we're actually designing strategies that's not 10 or 20 years in the making, but actually has a much longer impact, that will make a huge difference in terms of how we approach these strategies as well.
Absolutely, Suné. Just to stand with Benedicta and her invitation for these conversations to be inclusive and interconnected, as we really truly believe from the Institute for Future Studies and from a futures perspective that sharing these multiple approaches is where we'll find the richest solutions that meet our widest needs.
Absolutely. I hope that some of you can still stick around, and I also want to welcome the ones that's joining us for the next session. Thank you very much, Njeri and Benedicta, for joining this conversation. It was really an incredible and a very inspiring conversation, and I'm definitely leaving with a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure our audience will do as well.